Welcome everybody to another episode of another episode.
And a week and an episode.
A week and an episode of Voices from the Desert.
Just so you know, everybody, that we know if you do the howl with us, you're on board. You're now.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Did you?
Regardless of whether you're in a desert or not, because now we know that the desert is taken metaphorical meaning on, because the desert isn't just a place you go; it's the desert of your heart.
Yeah.
And that I learned that one from Benedicta Ward.
Oh.
And she talks about the spiritual pilgrimage, and how over time it went from the idea of going into a desert to the idea of the heart being the desert.
Well, and Benedictine Ward is a very big speaker in Orthodox circles, I believe, and really talking to evangelicals trying to explain language. If I'm not mistaken, I think I've seen.
She's not Orthodox, though. She's not Orthodox.
Oh, is she not?
No. She is an Anglican reader.
Really?
Benedicta Ward. She translated the sayings of the Desert Fathers. It's pretty much the de facto version that people go to. But I would imagine.
Here I am typing it into.
We're on the fly Google search result.
See, we're talking about the same person here.
Yeah, maybe we're talking about a different person, but
Benedicta.
Benedicta, yeah, Benedicta.
I bet you were talking about a different last name Ward.
So maybe that's very possible. Murray and I get confused a lot, everybody, just so you know.
Ignatius, Athanasius, Irenaeus. Come on, guys, mix it up a little bit. It's too
I know. And then not only that, and then it's like every 100 years there's another one with the same name, and it's like, well, what am I supposed to do with that? Right? It's like we were talking about John Cassian earlier, right? And I said, in his conferences with Abba Isaac, and it's like, well, is that Isaac the Syrian? Is it Isaac of Scetus?
I know we did that today.
Isaac is it, right?
Who are we talking about?
Yeah, which one are we talking about here? That was actually when I did all of the articles on the Desert Fathers and the Desert Mothers. I did the 52 articles over a couple years.
Amazing stuff, everybody.
One of the hardest parts about it was when you're doing the research, figuring out if you have the right father or the right mother.
That would be just so frustrating.
Oh, it would be like, okay, is this the actual right guy? And there's some of them where I'm still not 100% convinced. There's some of them that's obvious. Macarius the Great, we know. But even then, when I was doing it, because you've got Macarius of Alexandria and you've got Macarius of Egypt.
Oh, so
which
there you go.
Is it, right? One was way more prolific than the other one. And so you'd have to figure out, even the ones that seemed a lot clearer, you could still get easily confused by. And it's the guys, let's make it a little bit easier,
Yeah, it's poor. I mean,
but Josh and Murray would just be Josh and Murray.
Yeah, so, I mean, I've always wondered if I ever converted, what I'd have to change my name to.
Like, do you get to choose your name, or does someone confer it upon you?
I think you get to choose it. That's my understanding.
You could see
there's somebody you're drawn to, their theology, or sorry.
Murray's still looking up Benedicta Ward and trying to figure this out. Yeah.
It totally threw me.
That's right. You could tell if you guys have listened to us for any length of time that we're not quite as evangelical as we used to be, but we're definitely not as orthodox as some want us to be.
Yeah, we're kind of.
And we have a great deal of respect for the Catholic writers in the Catholic Church. We were just talking about John of the Cross and John Cassian, who'd be a Western theologian. And although the East would claim him as well in terms of saints because of the time frame. But, we're like, Murray and I are kind of all over the place.
Yeah. And what it is? We teach so much and do so much like didactic theology that it has to have really crisp segues. That when we get to do this, we're like, screw it. They're not doing any segues at all. This is going to ramble because
we just
been doing it 30 years.
Right. Yeah, we just ramble. That's right.
That's part of it too. But
yes.
Most podcasts are kind of that way. So
you're maybe our audience now has.
I got to stop looking because I just have cat videos coming up.
Yeah.
Now, so
okay. Yeah.
I'll find it later because I'm like. This totally confused me.
Maybe at this point our audience appreciates our irreverence for, either if it's evangelical, charismatic, Pentecostal, Mennonite, Reformed, whatever, we've got an irreverence on that side. But then when we're talking about the Orthodox Catholic side, we've got a fair bit of irreverence on that side as well. And we don't quite do that justice. And
yes, that's very true.
Yes. And so if you're along for the journey, you're basically just along to hear Murray and I ramble and talk about the things that we think are important. Yeah, they're at least important to us. And as we've said, many times when we record these episodes, we're now recording an hour and over an hour and a half into the actual time we got together to start recording. Right?
That seems to happen. I always say we should actually record our pre-record time. People might find that more interesting.
The problem is Murray tells stories about naked men running through ministry times, and so we just can't.
You have to tell that story.
we just can't. These are
it's
just
a true story.
It is.
It happened.
But Murray made clear when he told me that he didn't see anything. So
I was praying for people. I missed the whole thing.
Yes, yeah. So that's the reason why we don't typically record the preamble, is because things come up that we're like, well, we might have to edit that out later. So yes.
We'll have to. Anyway, let's just say that many people had quite they've got some exposure that day.
Yeah, there you go. Well, let's just didactically segue away from that, okay?
Yes.
That
did happen, everybody. You don't need any more knowledge, or this will become an R-rated show.
No more knowledge. That's right.
Well, let's just say that someone wanted to do the dance of David, and they misinterpreted the passage.
Very, very dramatically misinterpreted.
Yeah. Their heart was in the right place, but nothing else, unfortunately.
So, Mur, we've been on this kick for the last few weeks. What kind of started just as a thought when it came to exploring the idea of the bridal paradigm in Scripture, and Murray, you had suggested it, and we found the more we dive into it, the more there is to kind of explore.
Yeah,
right?
We're definitely discovering there's a lot of offshoots here, a lot of roads that we could take. As we're talking about the theology of a bridal paradigm, you'll see it today start to move off. How has the church applied this, especially with the Desert Fathers and Mothers?
Yeah.
And then, and how do you apply today? So you can kind of see that we've all of a sudden maybe bit off a lot more than we could chew here in one bite. So, which is good, right? Because theology, there's orthodoxy, right belief, and then there's orthopraxis, right application.
Right.
And we're starting to kind of move here a little bit. So, but very important, very important. And I said to Josh earlier, and I think this is a good thought, and I think it hits our audience right in the sweet spot. So
just stop thinking about your ministry times, Murray.
Sorry. Okay. So I think,
no pun intended.
No, well, a little bit. I shouldn't have though. So that it's just charismatics. We've had this experience of the heart awakening, right? And I would say most of us probably, maybe not all, but have come out of some very didactic theological times or churches.
And for the record, as you're saying that, Murray, just hold that thought, please.
Okay.
When we at this point in our lives, when we say that we are charismatics, what we don't typically mean by that is that we are falling down, tongue speaking, crazy, flopping all over the place types of people.
Well, I don't know about you.
I'm not saying that that's not part of our experience. But when we say
it's not a major part of the experience.
No,
does it happen? It happens,
yes.
Everybody. It happens. But is that a defining moment of my Christianity now? No.
Yes. So
and there was a time I believed it was. This is the apex of Christian experience, this direct encounter with God, which I do believe direct encounter with God is the apex. But it fits more into now what we're talking about today.
Exactly. And that's what I wanted to say. The apex. Yes.
Now I'm holy. I'm filled with the Spirit. God is with me. I'll be in manifest presence all the time, and I'll be giving it away, and people will be getting saved. And not so much.
What we would describe as the charismatic experience today would be what you just said, the heart awakening.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And there is the kind of core of what it means to us. Now, not everybody's going to agree with us, but therein lies the core of what it actually means to have been moved by the charismatic move, or been involved in the charismatic move. There was a heart awakening that completely reoriented your life. And now that's kind of different sects of that have spiraled into different places. But for Murray and I, just to clarify for the audience, that's when we say we're charismatic, that would probably be an accurate way of summing that up. We have had a heart awakening.
Charismenodox.
Yeah, we've had a heart awakening, and it's been a direct impression upon our inner life from the Holy Spirit that had a profound and dramatic impact upon us. And so,
and let's break that down a little bit, if you don't mind, because
did you hold the thought? You're still holding the thought, I hope.
I've moved on to a different thought.
Okay.
But it's a good thought. That other thought, I don't know. It's somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Well, everybody, why don't we try something? Let's just make this practical. It'll take me 40 seconds. We've maybe done it before, but because I want to make a comment about charismatic churches and this heart awakening thing, because it's an important point that is very real and very important. So we don't want to treat it lightly here, and I don't think we are, but here's the kind of thing. So, and everybody, forgive me if we've done this before, or if I'm pushing the narrative too hard, but I think it's important. So, everybody take 20 seconds, if you don't mind. Everyone listening, take 20 seconds and think an administrative thought. Something you got to do today, groceries, taxes, remember a former address if you can, right? If you want to do it that way. See if you can remember your spouse's phone number, because nobody does anymore because it's all on auto dial on the phone. But just take 20 seconds, okay? Administrative thought. What do I got to buy today for the animals? And, point with your finger where those thoughts are happening. Just humor me. I can't see you, but by faith, you're probably going to point to the noggin, right? Right there. That's okay, right. So try this. As the charismatic, let's do it this way first. And let's do it a couple different ways. So, again, everybody, you got to test revelation with scripture and fruit. Peace, joy, goodness, patience, fruit of the Spirit, inner witness, confirmation, bounce it off others. Lots of tests, but you got to have something to test. Let's get something to test here. So try this, everybody. Inside voice, inside, not out loud. Try this. My son, my daughter, I love you. And let it flow for 20 seconds. Inside voice. Well, I'll do it. I'll do it too. My son, my daughter, I love you, and...
You're saying here like as if the Father's saying that over you. That's what you mean, right?
Just like the Father's saying it over you. Inside voice. And just let it flow. River flow. Son, my daughter, I love you, and... Just like the Father's saying it. Okay, and if you could point with your finger where that's going on, where would you point? And probably you're pointing to your heart. Down here. Okay, now that's an important distinction. The part of you that was probably criticizing, what are we doing right now? It's probably up in the head, right? So, but just think about this, what's going on in that location. So where do you feel conviction? Kind of right there, right? What about Thanksgiving? So everybody just take a second and be thankful. Do not be drunk with wine, but be full of the Spirit. Sing songs and music, spiritual songs from your heart to the Lord, and be thankful. Just be thankful for a second. Where's that? It's down there. What about, have you ever had a song playing inside of you? And you're like, what is that song? Where's that coming from? I know the words to that. What part of you is wondering what song it is, and what part of you is actually singing it? Right? Same thing. Now, here's the thing. I just want to point this out. Or have you ever been open mic at church? One more. It's open mic at church, and you feel the tug of the Lord. Go up there, right? And you're like, no way, I'm not going. Right? I'm going to make a fool of myself. Where do you experience the tug? And what part of you is going, don't you dare? Right? There's a head and heart thing going on here. So why this is important is that in Western theology, we tend to train this big brain thing up here, which is important. Luke was a doctor. Paul was quite a theologian. But Paul says when he's Ephesians 3, right? he's in prison. People are freaking out. May God strengthen you in their inner man, so Christ may dwell in your heart by faith, so you would know how high and wide and long and deep is the love of Christ. Those are all heart things, inside, inner man, right? Paul uses this term, secret man of the heart. Peter does, sorry. That surpasses gnosis, that you may be filled to all the fullness of God. So in the charismatic experience, you're having this heart awakening. So, everyone, this is a kind of a big deal because, I mean, when we look, let's say we look at charismatic churches, you have in your congregation probably, 60% women, maybe more, and they really want their husbands to come, but where are they? And the problem is, if you come into a charismatic heart experience where this inner heart is awoken, where the song's playing from, or and you're just living out of your head, it's really difficult to be there. And like for me, at the end of a day's work, if I'm working on the farm here, I'm building a building and I'm having to put up a wall or put in a foundation, and I'm thinking mathematically, and then I have to go right into sessions where I'm having to be aware of the Spirit's doing. It's tough to do because I've got to get out of my head. And so we have two problems here, and we're talking about them a little bit. Is once your heart awakens to divine love, and in the charismatic culture, you have to have an encounter for that. So
that's the language that we typically use.
So if you have an encounter and you awaken to divine love, you'll notice you want more. You want to go to meetings. You want to get prayed for. You want come Holy Spirit. You want, right? Because it's not just a cerebral left brain thing anymore, but your heart awakens. And that's this divine love. That's the beginning of this journey. And to, we're going to talk about it here. The ancient church has different language for this a little bit, but the thing being that this is a journey that goes somewhere. So in the charismatic church, we found a way that awakens, but we have found no way to maintain it.
That's really good. Yeah.
Other than an external experience by a worship team, by laying on of hands, by charismatic preacher, and
so then it flames out, and
then it flames out, and we wonder
what happened to that person. What happened to me? Yes, I used to be so passionate. I used to love Jesus so much, and I've lost it all.
That's right.
What's wrong with me?
And often what happens is if you've had a heart awakening experience, and then you try to follow Christ in just didactic theology, and I don't know how many people they say, when I first got saved, I had 6 months of passion for Jesus. I don't know where it went. Well, that's because you only had the left side of your brain trained for 6 months, and nobody taught you how to just sit in the presence of God, right? And the other problem is you have these charismatic experiences in the charismatic church, and now you're put to work, where it's about the vision of the leader, or it's about serving in the church, which again, it's not bad, but if you don't have a foundation of divine love where you're cultivating it, I mean, how many marriages flame out because you started out passionate for each other, and now with kids and work and ministry, you don't have time to work on it. Same with Jesus, right? And I'll throw in this one thought that's going to mess you all up, which I hope it does. So in our theology, we not only need to have an understanding of this divine love for his bride, which is, segueing back to last week, and it begins in a wonderful charismatic way, in the charismatic church of encounter. And when you have it, when you want to go to more meetings, you want, say, come Holy Spirit, you want hands laid on you, you want to be prophesied over, you want to be down on the ground, that hunger is the beginning of a journey to something deeper, and that's the beginning of it. And God wants that, because no one can come to the Lord unless the Lord draws them, right? This is Ephesians 3 that I just quoted. The Lord wants us. This is a good spot for that ecstasy verse. We'll come back to that. Ecstasis.
Yeah, we'll come back to that. Yeah.
But you see, the thing is, if you don't understand the Lord's longing here, and you step into the book of Revelation without a bridal paradigm, and it's about working or just doing or just theology. If you step into the book of Revelation without that paradigm, you're stuck looking at the book of Revelation being about the Antichrist and the end times and how much trouble you're in.
Yeah,
because,
that's right.
because you're supposed to be reading it through a hungry heart experience of encounter that continually transforms you into a bridal intimacy desire for God, where, again, this Hebrew, this word, Lord, Lord, we'd heal the sick and raise the dead. Depart from me, I never knew you. Adam knew Eve. But this journey needs to continue. And this is where contemplative prayer comes in. This is where time alone with God comes in. This is where retreat comes in. This is where, all of that happens. And so as we started out, and the reason I mentioned this is that, charismatodox, right? I still am charismatic in experience. I would think so. But I think one of the Desert Fathers said, I can't remember who it is, don't never let the outer life dominate the inner life, right? Even prayer. Like, if you go to church and the Spirit of God's moving in your heart, just say the Jesus prayer and pay attention to the flow of the Spirit in you. Ignore the service.
Let me put
That's more important.
Let me put it something like, I was watching a long form interview recently, and it's interesting how the way that we're going with the conversation, but
I didn't go like we prepped it, guys.
Well, we'll get there too. I was watching a long form conversation, and it was the American Gospel guys. I don't know if you've watched any of that stuff, but they're reformed cessationists basically, and they were sitting down. They sat down with Michael Brown and Sam Storms, talking, kind of trying to have a conversation and ironing things out, and which was, it was interesting. I watched it on and off, and then couldn't take it anymore because it's just, anyway. And I realized that when we talk about being charismatic, especially as it is kind of coming from this bridal paradigm idea, when we talk about being charismatic, and why we're taking a few minutes just to define that a little more exclusively.
I think it's important. I really do.
It is. And we hear, like one of the things that happened is the American Gospel guys kept referencing, Benny Hinn does these weird things, or Sid Roth has these crazy people on his shows, or Kat Kerr is a crazy person, right? And so they look at that, and they go, that is what it means to be charismatic. That's what these reformed cessationist guys, that's what it means to be charismatic. But the thing is, Marie and I look at that and go, that has nothing to do with what it means for me to be charismatic.
Yes.
Right.
And again, I really
not denouncing any of those people. We're not denouncing any of those people on either side of that conversation. I'm not trying to say that. It was an observation going, oh yeah, when I talk about coming from a charismatic background and calling myself, quote unquote charismatic today, I really don't mean it in the sense of I'm involved with the movement and this is who I am. I mean, I had an experience that transformed my life, and some of the language we use may be kind of overlapping with, it's like the Eastern mystics and the Orthodox and the Western mystics and the Catholic have overlapping language, and people in Eastern mysticism, Hindu, Buddhist, whatever, there's overlapping language with the Christian mystics too, but it doesn't mean the same thing.
Yeah.
So when I say encounter, I don't mean that I'm having visionary experiences. It means that I've found great meaning in the language of the Christian mystics when they talk about holding the vision of God in the heart in a substantial way because he's impressed himself upon me. That makes way more sense to me than I had a visionary experience, or I had some kind of esoteric, crazy visit to heaven or something like that. And so, some people go, oh, he's charismatic, and they're talking about an encounter. So they're talking about being taken to heaven and seeing things, like all these other weird charismatic people say. And I'm saying, well, no, we've found a lot more solidarity in the mystical literature in Christianity about the vision of God being impressed on the heart that makes a radical transformation and warms us to the sweetness and pleasure of the mystery of God. That's the language that we would really resonate with, and not the other stuff. And so,
absolutely.
So that's where it's like teasing out, what do we actually mean by that?
Yeah, it's a big,
and it kind of fits within the context of what we're talking about.
And it's interesting because, again, from my experience, I mean, I guess everybody, your experience might be different, but my experience, being charismatic, for almost 30 years, and this I'm talking about, in the charismatic, church, I've been through like 8 church splits, so I've seen like all kinds of stuff where people have had experience, but at the same time, split churches and pastors become gay, and all kinds of stuff, and it's like,
Murray's
well,
kind of, you've run the gamut in terms of what you've seen. I know a
yeah,
lot of the stories, and it's like, I
and
mean,
and it's like, well, how can you? I mean, one of the last things that happened for 2 years, I think 50% of my time, 2.5 years, almost 3, was conflict resolution. And these are with people that could hear the Lord like you wouldn't believe. And here they're handing me books on the Jezebel spirit about someone else they've been working with for 10 years. Like, so, and they're flopping on the ground. And I don't want to, I don't want to come against that, because I think God does some good therapeutic stuff there. But if you stay at a level of experience, and it doesn't increase your heart passion to become the bride, pure and spotless,
yeah,
and those aren't going together, you can get caught up in experience and never really become like Christ. What keeps your heart hungering and passionate for God? And I remember one of the Desert Fathers said, like, think of it like this: a young man's gonna get engaged to this young woman, and he's just got engaged, and he's walking through the most dangerous, stinky, filthy part of town. He doesn't even see it. He's so in love that he's not even aware of it, right? And to keep your heart in a place of love like that, Paul would say in 1 Corinthians, 14, be zealous, especially for the gift of prophecy. Like, just be zealous. And it's, I mean, there's dark night of the soul seasons, and we go in and out of that. I think every marriage does. Nobody stays in honeymoon all the time, but the idea is to be pleasing to the spouse. I mean, again, even Jesus's word to the church of Laodicea, I wish you were hot or cold, but you're lukewarm, so I will spit you out of my mouth. Return to your first love. That, that's again,
right.
the Hebrew concept of the honeymoon suite, which we talked about last week. Return to that. And so the question is, how do we continually grow as people who want a passionate, intimate relationship with God, in this paradigm that says, ever more intimate,
Right.
and then give that away? How do we do that? And it has to move beyond just attending meetings and having experiences that are I think experiences are supposed to be like road signs. We
And it
want
moves
road
beyond,
signs.
simple study time as well.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And that would be the head part of it too.
yeah.
Like, but like, experiences should be a sign on the road on a journey of becoming. Right. That's what they should be.
Yes, that's right. It seems to me that people in our contemporary society mistake the information of a thing with knowledge about that thing.
Yes.
And that's when Jesus says, and we're not throwing anyone under the bus with this.
We're just talking
just
kind
saying,
of our own experience of this journey,
when
everybody. If you want
Jesus
to put it
says,
like, well, that's what
that's
you
right.
think. Yeah, that is what I think. So
yeah, there you go. When Jesus says, "Depart from me, I never knew you," the terminology he uses there is the Greek word gnosko, not the Greek word gnosis. Gnosko is direct knowledge through direct participation. It's not knowledge through information gathering.
yeah.
And so when he says, "I never knew you," he's saying, I never essentially, this is what he said: I never experienced you, is what he's
Oh,
saying.
what a great way to put that.
And he's not saying, this is what, and contemporary Christianity, there's a lot of circles who think, well, as long as I know more and more about him, I know him. Well, that's not the case. So here, this is going to segue us into what we wanted to talk about today. Yesterday, I live in Eastern Canada. Murray lives in Western Canada. Murray, we had quite the phenomenon yesterday, which was the solar eclipse. And I don't know how many. I don't know if you know anybody that was prophesying cataclysmic events, but you know.
I think that solar eclipse went over like 7 towns called like Nineveh, supposedly.
I thought that's what people were saying, and it was supposed to be some kind. Anyway, all I know is,
Anyway, sorry.
well, in our see, and this is where we also understand the charismatic weird side of things, is that all of the prophecies that were about something happening have now turned into spiritual things have happened. Right? That's kind of how people get out of, well, this is going to happen, this is going to happen.
That's a good point. I mean,
spiritual things now happen. And well, let me say
no,
this.
keep going.
Let me say
I
this.
don't want to interrupt you again.
I'm being a little bit facetious when I say that. I'm poking fun at our own prophetic cesspool.
Yes.
So
which we're a part of, everybody.
Which, well,
hopefully we're sitting on the edge of it.
If Daniel can go, we have sinned when it comes to Israel's complete neglect of God, then we can say, yeah, it's our prophetic cesspool too. So Murray, I kind of drag Murray into some of these conversations, right? So
I'm a Mennonite. I don't like direct confrontation.
So Murray had zero. I think you guys had zero coverage of the solar eclipse, right? It was nothing.
We had nothing. I mean, we had a totally soft and cloudy day, but it didn't even get shady. I mean, there was no evidence of anything.
Yeah, so
which is too bad. I wanted to see what the animals would do. I was like, wow, what's going to happen?
Right. You know? Well, we had our dog with us the whole time, and he didn't even pay attention to it.
Really? Oh, that's unfortunate.
He's a lab also, so the labs just kind of go around happy-go-lucky, and as long as they have something to chase after, they're happy, which he did. So we got the kids together. They got out of school early, and we went over to my mother-in-law's house. And we're watching the eclipse from there. And we were right in the path. We had 2 minutes of direct. I have never seen anything like that.
Really?
Honestly, it was one of the most. It was probably the most. It was probably the craziest natural phenomenon I've ever seen.
Wow!
It really was.
See, my knowledge, I can't even understand that, right? Because
I've never
is what
seen
we're
anything
talking
like
about.
That. Yeah,
really?
Exactly. I've never seen anything like that. And, pictures just don't. And the pictures you have seen people share on social media with the black hole and the light emanating from it, the clarity of that was, anyway. So
wow.
we were in the path of 100% total blackout for 2 straight minutes.
Wow.
And it was just quite the experience. So my point is, and I wanted to bring this analogy because I think it fits really well with where we're going, is, they say the whole time as it started in our time about, I think, at 3:27 or 3:26 or something like that. And full eclipse was an hour later at 4, maybe it was 4:34, I think was the full eclipse. But they say, don't look at, we all had glasses, all that stuff. Don't look at it because of the concentration of light that's beginning to happen. Does more damage to your retinas, right? And so I happened to, as we were driving, and a whole lot of people were driving, trying to get to better viewing places, because even just driving 15 minutes away increased the time frame of the eclipse by 30 seconds.
Oh, wow. That's significant.
So, and driving about an hour away would have been 2 whole more minutes of eclipse.
Wow.
So anyway, I happened to look out and look up and see the sun in the first 10 minutes of the eclipse, and my eyes were blinded. I could see that, and actually today I've been going, my eyes feel it's like they feel sore and tired today. I'm wondering if that's because of that. I just glanced for a second, right?
Wow.
And I had to look away because the immensity of the light and the piercingness of light was just too much. I couldn't look there. Right. So then we have to put the eclipse glasses on when we get to the place we're at. Right. We have to, I'm going to use an obvious scriptural parallel. We had to look through a glass dimly. Right. In order to see, in order to see the light, because otherwise it would have totally blinded us. Right. And so we're watching it. I have pictures on my phone. I sent one to Murray of the moon, and I put the glasses over the lens of the phone and took the pictures. And so you could see the moon slowly covering the sun. And then you get to the point where finally full 100% eclipse happens. And all of a sudden it's like it the light was getting darker and darker, but then it just happens like instantly. All of a sudden you're at probably, 8, 9 PM, it feels like, right? The dusk has settled
Wow.
and it's turning, and you can see some of the stars out actually
Wow.
at
Cool.
4:30 PM, right? And so I was on the phone with my mom showing her on the video too, and she saw the change in light happen so all of a sudden. And then as soon as the light dimmed, you could look up at the sun, right? And what you could see, that's again, I've never seen anything like it before. You see this large black hole right in the middle of the sun and some light shining out from it, but everything else has become dark. And so you've got a minute and a half from where we are where you can look at that before all of a sudden it moves and then the light starts to pierce again. You can't look at it anymore. So,
Wow.
right, it was an incredible experience.
So could you look at it without your glasses for
You
that
can look
minute and a
at
half?
for that minute and a half. You can look at it without your
Wow.
glasses.
Oh, that would have been
So
cool.
so I want to draw this parallel because this would be something right up within the mystical literature, right? Is when with naked eye you cannot look at the sun, but as soon as it's obscured, you can look at it. Right? You can only look at the light when you can only see part of it. You can't look at the light when you can see the whole thing.
Hmm.
And the only time you can look at it is when it's actually covered by something else. And then you can surmise what's behind it, right? But you can't ever say what's behind it. So the only time you can actually look at the sun in a total eclipse is when it's covered by something else. And the only time you can look
Isn't
at it when
that
it's happening
interesting?
is when you've put a shade on and the mediating effect of the shade makes it possible for you to see, right? And so what we're talking about today, and it's taken us so long to get there in talking about today, is it when we're looking at the bridal paradigm in scripture and the way it kind of rushes forward to Revelation, and we talked about this, Revelation 21, the bride comes down, it's the heavenly city. In the Old Testament, you had Adam as the lover of God, and now you have a whole city full of people as the lovers of God. They're the bride, right? You've got the individual uniqueness of a person, and then the corporate city display where now the bride of Christ is all the people that have been subsumed into him. And this beautiful thing comes rushing forward throughout the Old Testament into the New Testament.
Yeah.
So
I mean, the Old Testament guides Hosea, right?
right, we talked all about this.
It's
Exactly.
there.
It's right. It's all right there. And Jesus, one of the things we said last week is that it's like the first century Jews, when it came to the kingdom promises, were expecting a warrior general who was going to overthrow the occupying Roman force and then institute God's kingdom again. And what they got was a wedding paradigm, right? That God's coming for a bride. He's not coming for a military commander. And so
That's
this
an
comes.
important thought we need to come back to again here.
It is,
Keep going.
and
I'm
it's
like,
all
wow, we got
comes
to talk about that.
crashing into the first 70 years of the millennia, and culminates in Jesus is essentially exonerated when the temple's destroyed. His greatest prophecy comes true, and so now we know what he said. Like his followers are all looking at this, and we've talked all about this, and so the question then becomes, what does it look like in practice for the church to think through the bridal paradigm? Where do we find this now in its application?
Yeah.
And it's actually quite interesting when you start looking at, you've got because the first iteration of church writings that we have would be we call them the apostolic fathers. That's what they're called, right? Now you've got Barnabas, you've got Irenaeus, you've got Ignatius,
Clement is
Clement.
probably in there. Yeah.
Yeah, Clement is in there. Yeah.
Ignatius. Yeah.
And when their letters are by and large very pastoral. They're dealing with pastoral issues at the particular, kind of in the vein of Paul, right? They're writing to the church of Philadelphia. They're writing to the church of Corinth. Clement writes 2 letters to Corinth, and they're addressing very practical pastoral concerns. Typically, Ignatius, in one of his letters, we talked about this in the prophetic series, he talks about the bringing a prophetic word to the church about unity and submission to, or obedience to, the leadership, right? And so very pastoral in how they come across. And it's not really, so you don't really find the in that first age of church leadership kind of any kind of robust appreciation for bridal language. You just don't see it there. Actually, the early church typically codified this spiritual way of Christianity as the way of life or the way of death or the way of light or the way of darkness. That's the language that they use typically. You just don't find bridal language very often. And I mean, then you get into, Tertullian and Origen, and really you don't find it there either, because now you're starting to get into more a Greek rhetorician style of teaching because of the Greek influence and the philosophical influence upon the early Christians as they moved away from their Jewish roots. And so you don't get bridal language really. I think one of the first consistent bridal paradigms we see when it comes to the early church literature is, and Murray and I have talked about this, is Macarius the Great. And in his spiritual homilies,
about 330, 340, 350.
Yeah, it's going to be right in there. Exactly. Yeah. So you're a few hundred years afterwards before you start seeing a kind of more robust, beyond just a kind of passing reference to bride and bridegroom kind of language, almost a generic way of referring to it that happens in the early church.
My sense of that would be just, you'd have to really do some more exploration on this, and somebody who's a real theologian would have a better picture of this than me. But I wonder if that's because the church, for the most part of that, was highly persecuted. And then you have, Arian coming along saying, he was just a guy. And you're dealing with these big heresies. You're working on the Trinity. Who's the Trinity? Like, you're really working on the nature of the Godhead until we get up to the Council of Nicaea.
Right.
And
even then you're still working out certain,
did
he have a human will and a divine will, or just one will, or what is, you're still working out the ramifications of Nicaea. Were 200 years in the church working out their language there too.
Yeah. And so I think, this paradigm has to build on top of that one, is what I'm saying. Historically, I think that there's a progression where this comes back after they've kind of figured some of this out, or the Holy Spirit's like, hey, let's talk about this. Okay, now let's bring this back in here a little bit.
And the reason I bring the eclipse analogy, for 100%. The reason I bring the eclipse analogy up is that it's very difficult to talk about these things. It really is. And you can even see Paul wrestling with it in his language, right? When he says, I've encountered the one who dwells in unapproachable light, who no one can ever see. So, how do you can never see him, and he can't be known, he can't be tasted, he can't be touched.
Irenaeus says something really good on that, where he says, how does he say it? Oh, I have to find the quote, where he says, God is not somebody who can be seen, but he can let himself be seen if he wants to.
Yes.
So it's like, you can't see him. However, if the God, anyway. So, but let's go back to that, if you don't mind. Say now I'm going to cause some trouble. You're usually the trouble causer. I'm going to cause some trouble. So you're teaching me how to do this. I just want to throw out one thought about if you guys don't mind, about the eclipse. Because again, there's a couple things, it's such a good parable. It's such a good symbolism here. There was let's just talk about it on one level between my experience of it, which was nothing. I'll have to read about it and watch it on videos because I didn't experience it. But look what Josh's experience. I'm sure you'll remember this till the day you die, right?
My kids will too. It was incredible. We were all deeply moved.
So I get to read about it. I could tell you all the stats about it. I could tell you how long it lasted, where it happened, and
my wife actually kept saying, "I never thought it would be like that."
Yeah,
I didn't know what I expected, but it was way more than I expected.
So you have, just as a comparison here, you have this lady. I don't know who she was. She goes to see this monk, and she's trying to impress the monk, and she says to him, "I've been reading the writings of Saint Maximus," and trying to go, "Hey, look what I'm learning." And the monk turns to her and says, "You've been reading Maximus. How then will you be saved?" And his point is, I have some fear for you, because you're just memorizing information rather than experiencing what he's talking about. See, Josh experienced it while I'm learning about it by reading it with my head. And it's not that reading with the head is bad. It's just that if you assume that's what real knowing is, rather than that's leading you into something, right? It's a sign upon your road of life leading you. Those are different things, right? And I'll ask one other question here, and Josh, you might have to bail me out. Here's the thing: I get in trouble. So, okay, let's talk about the eclipse, right? From a bridal point in time. What? That's tongues for a bridal paradigm.
That's tongue speaking right there.
That's tongue speaking. That's Mennonite Low German right there. Everybody, that's how I was called to the dinner table. I was a kid. If we're talking Book of Revelation, okay. So when you look at the comment, everybody, not comment, but the eclipse, are you thinking? I wonder how many cities of named Nineveh it went over, and what does this say about the end times, right? Or are you going, wow, I'm experiencing something, thinking about the magical,
that's a great point,
mysterious nature of God?
Yeah.
Which one of those is living out a bridal paradigm?
Yeah.
Right? Because I bet you how you're doing that's how you're reading the Book of Revelation.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yep.
Right? And one is drawing you into intimacy, and one is wanting to give you knowledge of what to do in your own flesh in regards, the apocalypse, or
the beauty of the sign is actually unimportant then.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? As opposed to how it evokes this like, oh my goodness, creation as a reflection of the Creator is incredible. Right? And it evokes this sense of wonder and awe and delight and mystery and majesty, as opposed to, okay, now we can get past the actual sign and see what it means.
Yeah, and guys, what is prayer supposed to do? Like Josh's experience of the eclipse compared to my experience of the eclipse, right?
That's right.
And again, like you read the Book of Revelation, and we haven't flipped it open, we're quoting it, but the whole thing builds up to this wonderful wedding, right? Blessed are those invited to the wedding supper of the Lamb. And then we have this wonderful imagery in the end of the book ends. If you go to a movie, it all builds to a moment right at the end. And the Book of Revelation is doing that. Where does this go? Well, it goes to this union between God and man. And marriage is the symbol. It's just a symbol. It's symbolic language, but it means something, something passionate, something intimate, something. And it's just important how you read it. And
here, let me, as you're saying that, let me do this. So here's a great quote from Macarius, using bridal language that describes what we're talking about in the best way he can. He's, like I think, Murray, you said before we were going to go live, what we're trying to talk about is like looking through a keyhole at the sun.
Yes.
And
brilliant.
You're just going,
not saying that I'm brilliant, but that example is brilliant.
So. That was a great example. It's like, what, and this is what we find in, I think you can see it as far back as Isaiah and Isaiah 6, when he's got this magnificent vision of God on his throne that's full of light, but he never describes what God looks like. You've got Paul and how he approaches these things. So we can go back to biblical language because, but we'll get here. So this is what Macarius says, right? Macarius, 4th century, as Murray said. Macarius was born in 300 and lived till 391. So he wrote this somewhere in there. Period. He said, a man goes in to bow the knee, and his heart is filled with a divine power. And his soul rejoices with the Lord as the bride with her bridegroom. The inward man is snatched away to yet further devotion, into the unfathomable depth of that world and much sweetness, insomuch that his whole mind is estranged, being raised off and carried off higher, so that for that time there's a cloud of oblivion upon the thoughts of earthly wisdom.
Oh,
for
interesting.
His thoughts are filled with divine and heavenly things infinite and incomprehensible, certain wonderful things which are impossible to be uttered. So Macarius's point that in this bridal paradigm, bride and bridegroom, right? We've seen this kind of broad sweeping narrative of God coming for a bride. Now we see it in the mystical literature localized to my particular experience.
Yeah.
Right? And so we're thinking of it now as bride, bridegroom, me and God, him coming to me. And what happens in that moment? I'm snatched away and love is inspired. And I see things and hear things and know things that I actually can't even talk about because I'm seeing them through the keyhole, because I'm seeing the sun, but there's a moon standing in the way, so I'm only seeing,
exactly.
right? I can only look because there's something standing in the way, right? So he's talking about this. It's incomprehensible, yet it's revealed itself to me, but I don't know how to talk about it. And the only language I can come with is that it's like I'm a bride and he's wedded himself to me, and now my devotion and passion has increased. Right.
Wow.
So this is what
Brilliant.
Mercurius is saying. This is how he's
You know,
describing it.
If you don't mind, Josh, maybe read that quote of Paul where you said, if I'm out of my mind, it's but if I'm in my right mind, it's for you. And then the thing about love, and then read Maximus's quote on
we'll go
maniacal eros.
Because
this all fits right there
it really
so
does.
well, you know.
And we're actually, we've been talking for so long, we're already winding to a close.
Yeah, I know. It might be a good spot to.
We'll go there because we've got a follow-up where we're going to talk about the experience of divine love, because it flows from the bridal paradigm. But Paul, well, let me say this first. Maybe I'll just throw this out there because we'll talk about this more later in another episode.
For sure.
It's not really until you get to, like, think about this. I've got the verse up, so we'll get there. Think about this, right? The church in its infancy is fighting for its survival, then it's fighting for its theology, and then it's fighting for its influence, and it's growing, right? And you're talking that we're just covered the first 1,000 years. And it's not until you get to about the 11th or 12th century that the bridal language really deepens. And you get certain pockets of it, like with Mercurius, but all of a sudden you get into guys like Symeon the New Theologian. You get a little bit later into Gregory Palamas in the Orthodox vein. You get into Bernard of Clairvaux in the Western vein. And
which again, Josh made a good point that Bernard of Clairvaux and Symeon would never have any idea of each other's existence.
They would
about the same time period,
about the same time,
about the same thing,
talking about the same stuff. That's right. So we see this kind of progression when it comes to bridal language, but it's not that it's not there. That's something we'll talk about.
Exactly.
So verse, this is 2 Corinthians 5, verse 13 and 14. For if we're beside ourselves, it is for God. If we're of sound mind, it is for you. For the love of Christ compels us, because we judged thus that if one died for all, then all died. So that's 2 Corinthians 5, 13 and 14. And Murray's got a point about that, but here I'll read this quote from, where is it? From Mercurius. Well, Murray,
hear this and then read the verse again.
Well, this quote from let's see. We've got to condense it a little bit because it's quite long. So I'll just read the first little bit. Theologians call the divine sometimes, and this is where we're going to get into trouble, an erotic force. Sometimes love, sometimes that which is intensely longed for and loved. Consequently, as an erotic force and as love, the divine itself is subject to movement. And as that which is intensely longed for and loved, it moves towards itself everything that is receptive of this force and love. To express this more clearly, the divine itself is subject to movement since it produces an inward state of intense longing and love in those receptive to them. Mm-hmm. And it moves others since by nature it attracts the desire of those who are drawn towards it. And I think that's probably enough for that quote there.
And this is Maximus, I believe.
This is Maximus. Maximus the Confessor, 7th century.
Cool.
7th century, I think. He was I think he died in the 680s or something like that.
So he's not using the word bridal, right? I mean, you guys, erotic or eros, you can see the word being used.
That's right.
And the church uses that a lot.
Yes.
But let's go back to that Bible verse and just use that as a lens. And so everybody that might be kind of cool. So I'll throw out my 2 bits because that's only fair, because I'm putting Josh on the T here. I'm just thinking that's not really fair. So when you see that verse, I wish if we're out of our minds, right? It's for God. But if we're in our right minds, it's for you. For love compels us, something like that, right?
Yes, that's right. You got it.
So the word out of our minds is the word where we get the word
stasis.
That's right. Where we get the word ecstasy from, right? Where it means out of your mind, insane, drunk with divine love would be a good way to put it. Standing beside yourself, like being in ecstasy, like you've forgotten about your body, you've forgotten about where you are. You're just taken up, right? And you could think about what Maximus was saying there about the experience of divine love in these moments, right? And just how Paul's using that. He's just experiencing this encounter. And then he's talking about the love of God, the love of Christ, the love of people. Divine love compels us. Well, if you're having this encounter of love, and then you feel God's love for people like that, you're being compelled by this.
That's right.
They're saying erotic force, like we're talking big, heavy language. So we have, this love for the, Song of Solomon love, if we want to put it that way. And
I think the particular term is maniakidos eros. I think that's what it is, right?
Yeah, like the word we get maniacal almost.
Maniacal, yeah.
Like
so
maniacal,
erotic for, but this is the translation into English. This particular translator has chosen the translation erotic force, but what it means is maniacal love. Like erotic, the erotic is from the word eros, which is a form of love in Greek. In Greek, we know in the scriptures we have philia and agape, and there's also a third form of love, which is eros, which is it's a love with intense passion and longing.
Yes, thank you so much for bailing me out there.
Yeah,
that's
so
brilliant.
So when we talk about erotic force, we're not talking about you've got to hear the language within the context of the culture. It's not talking about a lustful desire for pleasure. Exactly. It's talking about the force that's within you that compels you to love something and pursue that thing wholeheartedly. It's in a way, it's like 1 Corinthians 14 when it says pursue love. It literally says, the word pursue literally means to lust after love. Pursue love.
Isn't that something?
Earnestly desire spiritual gifts is 1 Corinthians 14:1. Pursue love, earnestly desire spiritual gifts, especially that you may prophesy. But pursue love literally means lust after the experience of love. And so this language is even in scripture. We just, our English translations kind of cover our, it's almost like the translation in English makes we all cover our ears because we're little kids and we can't hear it right.
Yeah.
Right? But then you start getting into some of the contemplative theologians like Maximus, who's a heavy hitter. Like this is one of the main church theologians in his day and age. We're not talking about secondary or tertiary options. We're talking about one of the main guys. And he's talking about the force of erotic love or passionate love that compels you and forces you towards a thing.
And again, I just want to read this out of the Passion. I know it's not really a commentary; it's more of a translation. Some people would fight me on that, but he's really thinking bridal paradigm when he put this together. So let's just see how he interprets this. I'd like to know. 2 Corinthians 5:13, I believe.
Yeah, 2 Corinthians 5:13. We can put the disclaimer out there that there's certain things and there's certain passages in the Passion that are phenomenally rendered, and there's certain passages that are butchered beyond belief.
Yes.
And
yes,
so
let's just say that.
Yeah, we'll just say it that way. Like,
if we're out of our minds in a blissful divine ecstasy, it is for God.
Which is the word there.
Exactly. That's why I wanted to read it, because that is the word in the text, everybody. Yeah. That's the word in Greek, ecstasis, something like that. If we are out of our minds in a blissful divine ecstasy, it is for God. But if we are in our right minds, it is for your benefit. For it's Christ's love that fuels our passion and motivates us, because we're absolutely convinced that he has given his life for all of us. But see, there's a divine motivation there he's talking about. Hey, this divine passion, it's motivating us. That's really cool. I just think that's really well rendered there.
Yeah, that's right.
It's good to have a bunch of translations, everybody.
It is good to have a bunch of translations. Yeah, that's right.
But so, and everybody, maybe to sum up, because I think we're getting about an hour here.
We are.
And Josh might have some more to say as well. But, it's important to, and why is this important? Okay, let me just say why this is important to me. So, and again, if I've shared this before, please forgive me. But in our conservative culture, which Christian culture where it's really about, the old saying, too much word, you dry up, too much spirit, you blow up, with both you grow up. Right. And I think that's good. But, it's interesting where when you're starting to walk with the Lord we have this experience of first love. We really do. And it's like, you just want to read your Bible all the time. You want to be with God and you want to pray. And suddenly, like, where did it go? And now the charismatic experience is, why did we become charismatics? It's because that's where it went. It's over there. Let's go do that. Right. So, and then after a while that can even die. And what we're trying to hit here is kind of a Western way of doing life, which is really rationalism, which is trying to deduce it all out of our right brain and even our charismatic experience. And what do I mean by that? So in our Western culture, we really want knowledge. So if I have a doctorate degree, often I feel closer to God than if I have a master's degree. And boy, if I want a pastor of a church, you better have more than a bachelor degree. And because I want knowledge, because I want to do it the right way, and I want the right answer, to know the right thing. So, but really with the early church, if you look at the birth of the church in Acts 10, Peter doesn't get any of that stuff. He gets a vision of a sheet with creepy animals in it. And it causes him have to have a relationship with Jesus, to walk with him day by day and put together the puzzle in an intimate relationship. So let me just describe that process a little bit, and why this call to pursue passionately is important, because it's not just a head thing. And I can use my charismatic gifting as a head thing. Lord, what do you want me to do with my life? What are you telling me today? Where should I be going? What should I'm still using my charismatic gifting to discern what to do. So, if I've said this before, forgive me, but I think it's important here. Why this talk is important, and then how to do it is coming up. We'll get there. But I'm out my favorite place with Jesus, walking, and I'm really troubled about something. And I'm like, God, tell me what I'm supposed to do. And he goes, what do you think of those bushes over there? Aren't those nice bushes? And I'm like,
Right.
What?
Right.
That can't be God. Erase the board, start again, keep walking,
yeah. What does
worship again.
What does the eclipse mean?
Yes, what does it mean? See, that's still rational left brain thinking. It means it's beautiful. I mean, if you were looking at a beautiful sunset with somebody, and you're looking at the sunset, and your friend's like, do you like that color pink? Isn't that a nice hue? And look at that orange, how it plays off the hills. Wouldn't you just go, could you shut up and let me enjoy this? Just, sometimes God is just beautiful.
Yeah.
And we're taking into ecstasy. So, I'm walking along the second time. I'm like, okay, just worship. Forget about your problem. But it's a big problem. I start to think about my problem. And I'm like, Lord, what's the right answer? And he goes, what do you think of those trees over there? Aren't those nice trees? I'm like, what? And then I got it. I could hear God speak to me. He just didn't want to talk about what I wanted to talk about.
Right.
And sometimes when you're not hearing the Lord, and we charismatics are like, oh, I'm not hearing God. I have to make a really big decision. What am I supposed to do? I don't hear it. Maybe he's mad at me. Maybe I'm in sin. Maybe I can't hear. You know what? Because it's all based on, I've got to come up with the right answer to do the right thing. And you can check that. And how do you check it is, are you in a left brain rationalistic mode where you're trying to find the answer? That's how we read the book of Revelation. How do you know you're doing that? Change the topic. Ask God about anything. Ask about your wife, your church, your kids, what's going on at work. And if he talks to you, you have no trouble hearing. He just doesn't want to talk to you about what you want to talk about. Right?
That's right.
Because we're looking for answers to do it the right way, while the Lord's looking for a loving relationship. Do you ever notice that when things are going wrong, you spend way more time with God? God loves that. Oh, they're spending more time with me.
Right.
Do you think maybe he doesn't answer just because it's like, I'm really enjoying this time with you?
Right.
Like, he'll answer eventually. He does. But maybe for him, it's about intimacy. Because when you walk with God, this is how it kind of works. You walk with God, you reflect his glory. And when a problem comes, you spend more time with him. And as you spend more time with him, you become more like him. And as you become more like him, your thinking change, your attitudes change, your behavior change, and you become the answer you need for your new season by intimacy, not by a right answer.
Yeah.
So even as a charismatic, if we're taking our relationship of experience with God and we're still making it about answers and doing rather than about being and becoming, we're still not doing it right. Because it's about the journey of becoming bridal intimacy, not just about finding an answer to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And that's why this paradigm is really, really important. And maybe I'll tell one more little story if you don't mind, and then we'll quit, or I'll let you respond. So an important thought. So I had this gal in my class, and she says to me, she could hear God pretty good. She goes, "Hey, I'm thinking about quitting my job. Can you ask the Lord about that?" Okay. And I'm like, "Okay, well." Okay. And he goes, "Yeah, that's all right." So I'm like, "Hey, yeah, that's fine." He goes, "Well, now I'm not going to quit my job. I'm going to ask for a raise. Could you ask the Lord about that?" Okay. And then the next week, I'm like, "Yeah, that's all right." Next week, and she goes, "I'm not going to ask for a raise. I'm thinking about just moving now." Okay, Lord, what do you think? Oh, yeah, it's fine. And then I come back the next week. I'm not thinking about moving now. I'm thinking about getting a tenant. And I'm like, and Lord goes, "Yeah, that's fine." And the Lord says, "You know what? She needs to quit thinking me of me as her boss, trying to find the right thing to do, and start thinking to me as her father or as her groom. I'm happy to just be with you, and then let's just do life together."
Right. That's right.
Right. And then the prophetic, so often it's like, what's the right answer? What should we be doing? Instead of who are we becoming?
Yeah.
And how are we being shaped? And the Lord doesn't care about those things as much as, St. Augustine, love God and do what you want. Or if you're like, or maybe Saul to Samuel, or Samuel to Saul, do whatever your hands find to do and God will be with you.
Yeah.
And we make all of these things about what's the right thing and what should I be doing and how does it work? And instead of like, how do I love him more? And how do I let him love me more? And how do I transform by divine eros, if we want to go back to this word, to become the bride and have his love flow out of me? And when you get, again, how you're reading the book of Revelation will tell you a whole bunch of where you're at on this.
Yeah.
Right? Are you looking at...
Or how you responded to the eclipse.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. How you responded to the eclipse. And that's why this topic is important. And because we don't realize we have a set of paradigms of Western culture based on didactic thinking. We learned all our schooling, elementary through high school, through college, to think like this.
Yeah.
But
and we're unlearning.
But the Lord wants you to think out of this relationship from your inner man, not just out of your head.
Yeah.
So
that's right.
There you go. That's
that's what we're learning, and that's what we're talking about. And we've got more to say about this. But
that sets up, I think, the Desert Fathers well.
For
where we're going to go. And
that's right. We've got at least one or two more episodes that we're going to.
I just got bit by a sheep.
Oh, Murray just got bit.
Which is probably what's going to happen when people hear what I just said.
What a perfect way to end the episode, on Murray's pain and suffering.
That's right.
Yeah. That's
this
right.
Now that
means now he's gonna go and Murray's gonna go talk to Jesus because he had a pain and suffering moment.
That's right.
So yeah, that's right.
Sheep bite. I've heard one pastor say that when his congregation gets mad at him, he calls it sheep bite. So maybe after what I just said, I'm going to get some sheep bite.
There you go.
Who knows? Oh no, I'm interpreting things not through a bridal lens.
Yeah, that's right.
So I just did it right there.
Yeah. So everybody, thanks for tuning in, and we've got more to come, and we hope that these conversations have blessed your walk and richly encouraged you. And so we're just so thankful for each one of our listeners. And
thanks for being with us, everybody.
That's right. Until next time, God bless.